This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hi everyone, I'm Nitsahone, and it's Friday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. This time around, we're looking at red board sweepers. White and black are generally the colors most well known for being able to blow up the board with a single card, but red has its share of ways to do it too. Now, generally, they don't just involve the word destroy. Most of them do damage to the entire board. And defining board sweeper can be kind of hard. Some people really only use it for wrath effects, in other words, only cards that say destroy all creatures, but while I think wrath effects are board sweepers, I don't think all board sweepers are wrath effects. For this video, a board sweeper can be one of two things. It can either destroy all creatures or do 2 or more damage to the entire board. I went with 2 damage because that type of effect can often blow up a good portion of the board and for a lot cheaper than a wrath effect. This means that cards that do 1 damage to the whole board or only damage your opponent's creatures were not included. A sweeper has to damage pretty much everything to be a sweeper, in my view, and far too many creatures can survive 1 damage to the whole board, so I didn't include those. So, as long as a card did 2 or more damage to the whole board or destroyed all creatures, and it was red, it was eligible for this list. And that includes multicolor cards. This isn't just a list of mono-red board sweepers. Before we get into the list, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A Pro Tour, Players Tour, Mythic Championship, Mythic Invitational, Legacy, or Vintage Championship top 8 is worth 2 points, and a Grand Prix or Magic Fest top 8 is worth 1 point. Alright, with all of that out of the way, let's look at some super destructive red cards. At number 10, it is Jund Charm, a modal card with a board sweeping option. One of the downsides of these sweepers that do 2 damage to everything is how situational they can be. Against some opponents, they just aren't good, because their creatures are too big, and sometimes you get it when it hurts you more than it hurts your opponent. However, by being a modal card, Jund Charm is the kind of low-end board sweeper that you can actually main deck, because its other effects will usually be useful when the deal 2 damage part isn't. Jund Charm can hit on graveyards or be a combat trick in addition to that sweeper effect. Like most charms, it doesn't actually do any of these things very efficiently, but its multiple uses make it a good card. In Standard and Modern, it was played in Jund mid-range decks. In Modern, it's also been featured in the sideboard of Living End. It has a single Pro Tour top 8 from Extended too in 2010, where it was played in a Jund deck. Jund Charm doesn't have any points since 2016, so it may not be on this list too much longer. At number 9, it is Sweltering Suns, a 3-mana sweeper that does 3 damage to everything. That's enough to devastate many decks. While it isn't quite as modal as Jund Charm, it is nice that it comes with cycling, so if you draw it at a time when you don't need it, you can at least throw it away and draw something else. It was mostly played in combo and control decks in Standard, like Aetherworks Marvel, God Pharaoh's Gift, and Blue-Red Control. It is also proven to be good enough for Modern, where it's played in Scapeshift decks as a way of slowing down aggressive opponents long enough so that the Scapeshift player can pull off their combo. At number 8, it is Earthquake, one of Red's oldest board sweepers, since it made its debut in the game's very first set. Earthquake lets you do X damage to everything, including players, but flavorfully enough, it can't damage flying creatures. It was a heavily played card in Magic's early days, showing up in a top 8 at pretty much every event between 1995 and 2000. It was played in control decks, but also in aggro decks, since it could be useful as reach against an opponent who's stabilized. It was reprinted regularly in core sets, giving it multiple shots at Standard. Pretty much whenever it was legal there, it saw at least a little bit of play. Its last reprint came in M10, and even though that was long after it was first printed, Earthquake still managed to make it into top 8s. While it was legal in Standard between 2009 and 2010, it once again was played in both aggro and control decks. It also gained a few points in Extended. At number 7, it is Storm's Wrath, a board sweeper that does 4 to creatures and planeswalkers. 4 damage is enough to kill most creatures, and a lot of planeswalkers too, and given what Standard has looked like lately, damaging planeswalkers is a big deal, since there have been so many powerful ones of late. It has gained almost all of its points in Standard, Control, and Ramp decks. Those type of decks want to make the game go long, and Storm's Wrath is a pretty good way of pulling the rug out from under aggro decks. It also has a single point from Pioneer, where it was played in a Blue-Red and Soul Artifact deck. It's still legal in Standard right now, so it seems likely it will accumulate more points before it rotates. At number 6, it is Deafening Clarion, another modal board sweeper and another 3-mana spell that does 3 damage to all creatures. As I've said, board sweepers can be somewhat situational, and Clarion gives you a decent backup option if casting it will hurt you more than your opponent. Giving your whole board lifelink isn't a great deal for 3 mana, but if you're ahead of your opponent, at least the Clarion can do that and make the race a lot harder for your opponent. The Clarion is actually kind of interesting because you can choose both, so if you have creatures with more than 3 toughness and your opponent doesn't, it can be especially devastating. Like most board sweepers, it has mostly been played in decks that want to make the game go long. Decks like Temur Reclamation and Fires of Invention might have kind of a slow start, but if they do manage to get to the later part of the game, they're pretty much guaranteed to win. So decks like that ran Deafening Clarion to help survive an opposing player's early onslaught. It has also gained some points in both Historic and Pioneer. In Historic, these points came in Omnath Ramp decks, before that deck got banned out of existence. And in Pioneer, those points came in Niv Mizzet Reborn decks, where the fact it was 2 colors meant Niv could grab it for you. At number 5, it is Radiant Flames, another 3 mana spell that does 3 to all creatures. It makes you jump through some hoops to make that happen. You have to pay 3 different colors of mana for it to do the full 3 damage. While that mostly sounds like a downside, it also gives the person casting it some control over the amount of damage it does, and that can be really beneficial depending on the board state. Sometimes doing 1 or 2 will be better for you. Radiant Flames gained all of its points in Standard, where it was played in lots of 3 and 4 color control decks. At number 4, it is Firespout, another 3 mana red board sweeper that does 3 to everything, although it has a really cool design that makes it feel considerably different from the other ones we've talked about. Part of a cycle of cards like it, Firespout can have different effects depending on which colors of mana you decide to spend on it. It only hits flyers with just green mana, only creatures with just red, and obviously, both, those with flying and those without, when you pay both red and green mana. This makes Firespout a pretty nice sweeper, since you can opt to choose the option that most benefits you when you cast it. That flexibility, plus the efficiency of 3 damage for 3 mana, has led to Firespout seeing play in all of Magic's competitive formats in which it's been legal. In most of these formats, it sees play in combo decks that like having a 3 mana sweeper that can buy them the necessary time against aggro decks so that they can go off with their combo. Meanwhile, in Block and Standard, it was mostly just played in ramp and control decks, where it slowed down aggro decks to make the game go longer. In Extended, it was played in Scapeshift decks as well as Tezzerator. In Modern, it's been played in combo decks like Splinter Twin, Scapeshift, and Primeval Titan. And in Legacy and Vintage, it's been played in Oath of Druids. At number 3, we have CHANDRA, Flamecaller, a planeswalker who can work as a board sweeper. Her -X lets her do X damage to everything, which means she can come down and immediately cause some significant destruction. In addition to that ability, she can also go after the opponent with elemental tokens or allow you to draw some cards. So far, this CHANDRA has not seen play since rotating out of Standard, and she may be a bit too expensive, mana-wise, to find a home anywhere else. Still, her 56 points have her pretty high up on this list, so she might be on it for a long time. At number 2, it is Anger of the Gods. As we've seen throughout this video, 3 damage to do 3 to everything is generally good enough to be played in Standard and sometimes in multiple formats. Anger of the Gods comes with the additional upside of exiling stuff that dies, something that's important for turning off death triggers or permanently dealing with creatures who might be capable of coming back from the graveyard. Modern has been where it's been played the most, and while it is featured in control decks there, it has also seen lots of play in combo decks like Scapeshift, Reanimator, and formerly Splinter Twin. These are decks that need every turn they can possibly get in order to combo off and quickly win the game, and Anger of the Gods is usually going to give them that time, and thus a greater chance of finding a way to combo off. It has also already accumulated 13 points in Pioneer, showing up in combo decks like Lotus Field and Fires of Invention. Anger of the Gods is a key card in Modern, and it's going to continue to accumulate points going forward. It will be interesting to see if it can ever pass the number 1 card on this list, and that card is Pyroclasm. For me at least, Pyroclasm is what I immediately think of when I hear someone say red board sweeper, so it isn't a big shock that it came in at number 1. While we've seen lots of 3 mana to do 3 cards on this list, Pyroclasm is 2 mana to do 2 to everything, and there are not very many other cards that do that. It might not be able to kill X3s, but most aggressive decks pack in enough X2s that this ends up being insanely efficient against them. Pyroclasm is one of those cards that has been heavily played so much for so long that going into a detailed list of all the places it has been played would be its own 10-minute video. It was originally printed way back in Ice Age and received reprints in 7th, 8th, and 9th edition. It took advantage of all of those reprints, amassing 69 points in Standard alone, but it isn't just a card that has been powerful enough for Standard formats. It's gained points in every competitive format it has ever been legal in. It's one of the best cards in the game for dealing with aggro decks, and that's going to lead to it continuing to gain points going forward. Well, that does it for this MTG Top 10. If you feel the need to own any of these powerful board sweepers, you can find them at Card Kingdom. You can actually find a direct link to each of them in Card Kingdom's store in the description. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. And if you need to catch up on the 335 plus other MTG Top 10s I've already done, you should see the playlist on your screen now. Thanks for watching.